Let's talk about something other producer channels aren't talking about. The constant stress and anxiety. You used to love making beats and everything that came with it. It was the reason you got out of bed early in the morning. You tried to squeeze in an extra half hour before school just so you can start off that melody or to finish up the drums you had started the night before. You couldn't wait to be done with school or work just so you can head back home and continue working on that beat that was stuck in your head all day. But now, things are different. This art form you were so passionate about has become the villain. It has taken your mental health hostage, and regardless of how you feel about it, it's chipping away at your sanity. You're constantly thinking about making beats, selling beats, branding, marketing, landing placements, to the point where you're having trouble doing things outside of music, like living. Even sleeping has become a challenging task for you. So in this video, we're going to put our toxic relationship with music production under the microscope and take some advice from Rick Rubin on how to develop a healthier relationship with our art. But before we begin, I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, because we're about to dive deep. Do you remember what making beats felt like when you first started out? Because I definitely do. I don't think I can accurately put it into words, but let's just say I felt like the next Kanye. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. I remember layering basses, synths, choirs, all kinds of crazy shit. I didn't know what keys were, I didn't know what sound selection was, I didn't know why arrangement was so important. It didn't matter though, because every single time I sat down to create, I had so much fun, I lost track of time. But then something happened. All of a sudden, I developed opinions. Oh, these sounds don't go well together, this isn't the genre, where's the hook? Where's the verse? All these questions were piling up in my head and I didn't have the answers to them.
You ain't got the answers, Sway!
So in an attempt to educate myself and take some of the pressure off from the stressful questions, I turned to Instagram. But that quick distraction would soon become one of my biggest enemies. Following other producers on social media is like a double-edged sword. I remember following every single producer I knew, and my justification for this was that by seeing their work, I'd get inspired and work even harder towards my own goals. But the reality was much different. Every single time I struggled with music, I turned to social media where I was bombarded by success stories. And soon enough, I felt like the odd one out. They were making 10 beats a day, I was making none. They were getting placements, I didn't even know what placements were. Their 808s were slapping, mine could barely be heard. Being a stubborn 20-year-old, instead of reflecting back on these thoughts and feelings, the only solution I could come up with was to go even harder. And even though I did eventually get better at making beats, over the years these negative thoughts piled up and turned me into a 25-year-old anxiety-driven producer who constantly felt like time was running out and needed to get his big break. I couldn't sleep and I was constantly thinking about what I had to do and how I could get ahead of my competition. I was caught in this rat race with a bunch of people I didn't know. But the sprint didn't last long. Before I knew it, I crashed and burned and left social media for several months. I had given up. Looking back now, I realize this is pretty common for producers. A lot of us experience it, but few of us look deeper into it. If you're currently in this position, don't give up just yet, because there's light at the end of the tunnel. Recently, I was reading Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, which I highly recommend, and in it, he highlights the importance of approaching any form of art like a newborn experiencing the world for the first time. In other words, with a blank slate. All your preconceived notions should be set aside. Don't think about specific genres, time signatures, VSTs, sound banks, none of that. Let go of everything you know, all that knowledge you've acquired, and make room for creativity to flow. You see, all the preconceived notions you've developed over time, along with the thousands of comparisons you've made time and time again, have piled up like logs in a river, blocking the constant flow of creativity. The only reason you're experiencing this so-called beat block is because you've set certain requirements for your art before even making it. You're constraining the idea before even translating it into reality. If you're thinking in type beat terms, you're eliminating your own voice. You've already set this imaginary filter to your creativity with a specific result in mind, and that's too much stress. And stress doesn't just reset overnight, it constantly builds up and gets heavier over time. Music, just like all other forms of art, is not meant to be a certain way. It's meant to just exist. It's a representation of the moment. Once the artist shares it with the world, it's up to the individual to interpret it however they wish. The further away I moved from chasing placements and selling beats based on demand, the closer I got to the 2017 version of myself. The newborn producer layering 6 808s with reverb, thinking it sounds amazing. Now, don't be too hard on yourself if this practice seems a little bit too vague or too hard to apply, especially in the beginning. All that's required is approaching every single day with an open mind, creating an accepting headspace where creativity can flow and ideas can grow. Some of you might find more value in this practice than others, and that's totally fine because not everyone's going to have the same perspective. So next time you sit down to make any sort of art, just close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths, and allow yourself to experiment and fall in love with the process again. If you enjoyed and want to stick around for more content like this, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.